We got a rare admission yesterday from the Kremlin, acknowledging its new military draft to reinforce Russian forces in Ukraine has been rife with problems. The Kremlin spokesman yesterday said there had been irregularities in the call-up due to cases of, quote, non-compliance. But the New York Times reports he tried to shift the blame to local authorities carrying out the mobilization among resistant civilians across the country. This as the governors of several Russian regions also acknowledged that men who did not meet the defense ministry's criteria are being called up. The authorities' admission came as a gunman who was allegedly distraught over the military mobilization opened fire yesterday at a draft office in Siberia, seriously injuring a recruitment officer. Meanwhile, the president of Kazakhstan, a close ally of Russia, reportedly said yesterday, quote, "In recent days, many people from Russia have been coming to us. Most of them are forced to leave because of the current hopeless situation. We must take care of them and ensure their safety. This is a political and humanitarian issue."
Let's bring in right now the staff writer for The Atlantic, Ann Applebaum, and former chairman of the Republican National Committee, Michael Still. Ann, obviously, this is an area, this is a region you've spent your entire adult life studying, focused on. I know you're well aware of the time that I was talking about before when, after the Soviet Union's fall, there was political and military and economic and cultural chaos in the former Soviet Union. Are we seeing something that may be the beginning of a similar meltdown for Putin's regime?
You're certainly seeing the first break in what was essentially Putin's deal with the Russians. So essentially, he offered them a kind of swap. You let me steal, you let me have absolute power, you let my friends and cousins and relatives make a lot of money, and in exchange, I'll leave you alone, and you can go on living your own life and not be bothered by politics. And that was even the deal with this war. So we'll conduct the war. We're not going to even call it a war. We're going to call it a special military operation. It won't affect you. You'll see it a bit on TV as a form of entertainment, kind of gladiator battle. But you won't have to do anything yourselves. And with this mobilization, suddenly the war and the kind of chaos that Putin has brought to Ukraine begins to come home. And people ask themselves, do I really want to fight the Ukrainians? Do I hate the Ukrainians? Maybe I don't. I have no military experience. Do I want to be sent to the front line? They're sending people apparently with no training, with poor weapons, with no equipment. And you're seeing the first kind of, it's not organized resistance. Putin has eliminated all the organized resistance in the country. But you are seeing, as you've just heard, people fleeing the country. You're seeing some military recruitment offices being shot up and firebombed. And so it is a kind of beginning of an unraveling of the arrangement of the last decade.
Yeah, and as you say, it is an act of courage to express any dissent publicly in the streets of Russia, and Vladimir Putin is quick to crack down on that. But is he actually feeling pressure? Is he capable of feeling pressure, whether it's internally in Russia at home or from someone like President Xi or Prime Minister Modi abroad? Does he feel pressure? Does he acknowledge that this is going badly for him?
So, no, he doesn't say, gosh, I made a mistake and I'm really sorry. But he does. He clearly feels pressure. So he feels pressure both because of Ukrainian military advances that took place over the last few weeks. We saw him at a really extraordinary summit a few days ago where he was snubbed by some Central Asian leaders, where both the Chinese and the Indian leaders made kind of oblique comments about how the war is not going badly. This is not a time for war. Erdogan, the Turkish leader, in an interview said, of course, the war must end and Putin must give back territory that he's conquered. So he's seeing the dictators and strongmen in his region begin to push back at him. And that has to be unsettling. And you just saw the note from the Kazakhs saying, we understand this turmoil in Russia and we'll take care of effectively Russian dissidents. And this is a country that's been thought to be dependent on Russia. You also see there's clearly pressure on him from the militaristic, nationalistic part of the political spectrum. It's very hard to judge how strong that is or how large it is. But there are these military bloggers and writers inside Russia who've been criticizing him for a long time, saying he's not fighting the war very well. There should be a mass mobilization. There aren't enough people. There are not enough weapons. And this mobilization effort seems to be in part a reaction to them. And that means he's feeling some kind of pressure from inside the system, maybe from within the military and security services as well.
You know, Michael, still, the economy, Putin's economy, which, as we talked about on this show, has a GDP smaller than the state of Texas. And that was before the war. That was before all of the economic consequences that grew out of this war. And that was before oil prices dipped the way they have over the past couple of months. The situation was dire enough. So you're going to turn to your partners to help you through those times. But as Ann said, China delivers a tough statement after his meeting with Xi. Erdogan says you're going to give Ukraine their territories back. We got from Modi just a slap in the face diplomatically during their meeting. And now Kazakhstan basically offering Xi too. This is a guy who's isolated in the world, and he doesn't have an economy that allows him to go it alone. So the question is, what's next? And what should the United States be worried about right now? What should be our focus?
I think on a number of fronts, as you and point out, that the allies, the supposed allies, are not really all in, and so they're letting Putin know that, okay, you just can't throw bodies at this. This has not been the 1 week operation you thought it would be. So the consequences that are starting to flow out of that are the kind of pressures that Putin is thinking about going into the winter. Yeah, I can't throw bodies at this, but I can make winter tough. I can hold out at least through winter. What does that mean for gas prices and for those in Europe and across the globe who rely on the oil that may flow out of Russia? How can they leverage that? And from the U.S. perspective, from an economic position, is what impact will that have financially on the markets going forward? Can the allies hold together in a unified front when winter comes? Because winter is coming. And so I think that's going to be an important feature for the Biden administration to make sure that the economic toll that can come from Putin messing around with the oil and gas markets, bringing pressure to bear there. Yeah, there's saber rattling with nuclear threats, but I don't know if people really believe that it's reached that point, elevated, DEFCON 2, if you will, in that regard. I think the winter is his play. And the question is, how do the allies put together sort of a block and tackle on the winter front to make it through the winter? If that happens, if they're able to do that successfully, I think the spring for Putin is going to be a hell of a lot rougher than he can imagine.